Imagine being judged not by who you are, but by what you look like. Now, picture walking through an airport only to find yourself in handcuffs, arrested for suspicion, without ever committing a crime. What would you do if this happened to you? This is the incredible story of Michael Bennett, a self-made billionaire and airline owner, who faced this exact nightmare. What unfolds next is a journey of power, prejudice, and redemption that will leave you speechless. Stay with us to witness how one moment of injustice turns into a life-changing movement for change. And hey, if you're enjoying stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It helps us bring you more powerful and thought-provoking content, and we'd love to have you as part of our community. It was a typical morning at JFK International Airport. Passengers moved about in their hurried paces, rushing to catch flights, sipping overpriced coffee, and shuffling through long security lines. For Officer David Murray, it was just another day on duty. Dressed in his crisp NYPD uniform, Murray stood tall, scanning the bustling airport with a sense of duty and authority. With almost a decade of experience on the force, he'd seen it all, or at least he thought he had. Officer Murray had always prided himself on his ability to read people. He could assess a situation within seconds, whether it was a lost tourist or a potential threat. His instincts, he believed, were honed after years of training and exposure to the city's diversity. But today, his instincts would be put to the test in a way he never imagined. As he patrolled near the International Departures Terminal, his eyes landed on a man who seemed out of place. The man was black, dressed in casual clothing, dark jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. He walked confidently through the terminal, seemingly without concern for the hustle and bustle around him. Something about the man's demeanor caught Murray's attention. In his gut, Murray felt that the man looked suspicious. Why was he so calm amidst the chaos? And more importantly, why did he glance briefly at the airport security personnel but didn't stop to talk like most other passengers? Murray's curiosity piqued, and he subtly followed the man as he made his way toward the VIP lounge. He watched as the man approached the entrance but didn't appear to have any bags or tickets in hand. "Excuse me, sir," Murray called out as he quickened his pace. The man turned, his expression calm and collected, but there was a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Yes, officer? Can I see your ticket and ID? You seem to be heading toward the VIP lounge, but I didn't notice you go through any of the proper checks." The man raised an eyebrow but remained polite. "I haven't gotten to security yet. I'm actually headed to the lounge before my flight." Murray's hand moved instinctively toward the handcuffs clipped to his belt. Something about this man felt off, and his presence in the VIP section without the usual signs of status, a sleek suit, expensive luggage, or visible signs of wealth, raised even more suspicions. "ID and ticket, now," Murray demanded, his voice more forceful. The man pulled out a sleek leather wallet and handed his ID to Murray. The officer looked down at the license. Michael Bennett. The name was vaguely familiar, but Murray couldn't place where he'd heard it. "Where's your ticket?" "I'm meeting someone inside." "They'll take care of it," Bennett responded calmly. "Meeting someone inside, huh?" Murray said with a slight sneer. "We've had a few incidents with loitering and theft here recently. I'm going to need you to come with me." A few onlookers started watching the interaction. Murray, feeling his authority challenged, made the decision on the spot. He turned Bennett around and began to cuff him. Bennett's face flashed with shock, but he didn't resist. "What the hell are you doing?" Bennett asked, his calm now replaced by outrage. "You're acting suspicious, and you don't have a ticket on you," Murray replied. "We'll sort this out at the precinct." As Bennett was led away in handcuffs, a small crowd began murmuring. Some took out their phones to record the scene. In the back of the patrol car, Bennett sat silently, his mind racing. He'd been in tense situations before, but this was different. He had done nothing wrong, and yet he found himself humiliated, treated like a criminal, and arrested in public view. As the car sped away from the airport, Bennett's mind flashed back to the many times he'd been profiled throughout his life, shopping in high-end stores, walking through certain neighborhoods, or simply driving his car. Today was different. He had spent years building his career, earning respect in a world that often doubted him. And yet, here he was, handcuffed, powerless, and judged without reason. At the precinct, Officer Murray booked Bennett on suspicion of loitering and resisting authority. It wasn't until 2 hours later that the truth began to unravel. As Bennett sat in a holding cell, his phone, confiscated during the arrest, began to buzz endlessly with missed calls and text notifications. His executive assistant, Margaret, had been trying to reach him, worried after he didn't show up for their scheduled meeting at the airport. She had taken matters into her own hands, calling a senior airport official who, in turn, contacted the NYPD about Bennett's unusual arrest. 2 hours after the arrest, Officer Murray was called into his supervisor's office. Chief Peterson, an older, stern-looking man, gestured for Murray to sit down. "Officer Murray, do you know who you arrested today?" Chief Peterson asked, barely able to hide his frustration. Murray shrugged. "Some guy named Michael Bennett. Seemed suspicious at the airport, didn't have a ticket on him." "Michael Bennett is the CEO and owner of Skyblue Airlines," Peterson interrupted. Murray's face went pale. The name finally clicked. Skyblue Airlines had become one of the fastest-growing airline companies in the world, and Bennett, a self-made billionaire, was often in the headlines for his innovative business strategies and philanthropic efforts. Murray's heart sank as he realized the gravity of his mistake. "You've just arrested one of the most powerful men in the airline industry," Peterson continued, his voice rising. "And you did it without cause?" Murray sat in stunned silence as the weight of his actions hit him. In his years as an officer, he had always prided himself on doing the right thing, but now he found himself questioning his judgment. Had he acted based on assumptions? Had he let his biases guide him? Later that afternoon, Bennett was released from the holding cell, his face composed but clearly weary from the ordeal. Officer Murray stood nearby, watching as Bennett calmly collected his belongings and walked toward the exit. Chief Peterson approached Bennett with a deep frown. "Mr. Bennett, I cannot begin to express how deeply we regret this incident," Peterson said. "This was a mistake, and we take full responsibility for the wrongful arrest." Bennett nodded but remained silent for a moment. He glanced at Officer Murray, who stood rigidly nearby, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Thank you, Chief," Bennett finally said. "But an apology isn't enough." Murray swallowed hard, expecting the worst. Would Bennett file a lawsuit? Would he use his vast resources to ruin his career? "I don't want revenge," Bennett continued, his eyes locking with Murray's. "What I want is change. You need to train your officers better." This was an example of profiling at its worst. Murray felt his chest tighten. He had never considered himself biased, at least not consciously. But here he was, facing the consequences of a split-second judgment based on nothing more than appearance. The story of Bennett's wrongful arrest quickly made its way to the media. Within days, news outlets across the country ran headlines about the billionaire CEO who had been handcuffed and humiliated simply for fitting the wrong profile. The footage taken by onlookers at the airport had gone viral, sparking debates on racial profiling, policing, and the thin line between security and discrimination. Bennett, despite his initial anger, saw the incident as an opportunity to address a larger issue. He called for a press conference a week after the arrest, where he planned to speak publicly for the first time. Standing behind the podium, with cameras flashing and journalists packed into the room, Bennett took a deep breath before speaking. "What happened to me was unacceptable," Bennett began. "But this isn't just about me. It's about the systemic issues that allow people of color, to be judged and mistreated based on appearance alone. I own Skyblue Airlines, and I was treated like a criminal. Imagine what happens to those without my resources, without my platform." The room was silent as he continued. "I'm not here to shame any one officer or the police force as a whole. I believe most of them are good people doing a difficult job. But we need accountability. We need better training. And most importantly, we need to address the biases that live within all of us." Bennett's words struck a chord with the public. He wasn't asking for sympathy or retribution. He was demanding change. His story became a rallying cry for a movement, as people across the country shared their own experiences with racial profiling and discrimination. Officer Murray watched Bennett's press conference from his small apartment, his heart heavy with guilt. He hadn't been fired yet, but the incident had shaken him to his core. For days, he had replayed the arrest in his mind, questioning every decision he had made that morning. What if he had approached Bennett differently? What if he had taken a moment to ask more questions instead of jumping to conclusions? The next morning, Murray made a decision. He drove to the Sky Blue Airlines headquarters, unsure of whether he would be able to meet Bennett, but determined to at least try. To his surprise, Bennett agreed to meet with him. In the spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, Murray stood nervously in front of Bennett's desk. "I just wanted to apologize," Murray began, his voice unsteady. I made a terrible mistake and I know that. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I'm going to do better." Bennett studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Officer Murray. But this isn't just about you. It's about the system that allowed this to happen. Are you willing to help change it?" Murray blinked in surprise. "Help change it?" Bennett leaned forward. "You've seen the problem firsthand. Now, let's work together to fix it."